Look at your most recent grocery receipt. Then look at your energy bill. And finally, look at your mortgage statement. You are paying for a war you likely did not vote for. A war that is currently burning through $1 billion a day of American taxpayer money. We are 16 days into the United States, an Israel military campaign against Iran, and the math is already turning into a nightmare for the American working class. While politicians in Washington stand behind podiums talking about epic fury and total demolition, the reality on the ground and in the financial markets tells a fundamentally different story. One astute observer recently pointed out a staggering paradox that mainstream networks refuse to touch. The cost to build a state-of-the-art hospital in the United States is roughly $100 million. Right now, the United States military is dropping the financial equivalent of 10 full hospitals every single day onto the deserts and mountains of the Middle East. Meanwhile, millions of American citizens still lack basic healthcare coverage. This is not a human rights critique. This is a cold, hard financial audit. The narrative we are being fed is that air superiority guarantees a swift and decisive victory. We are told that taking out radar systems and sinking outdated patrol boats means the mission is accomplished. But what if the adversary is not playing by the same rules? What if they never intended to match American air power, but instead designed a system specifically engineered to bankrupt the United States through a war of financial attrition? The global benchmark for oil, Brent crude, recently spiked to $90 a barrel as a direct reaction to the strikes. It is a clear signal that the financial markets do not believe the official narrative of a quick resolution. And this is just the beginning. The real shockwave is yet to hit the global supply chain, and when it does, it will not be measured in military targets. It will be measured in the collapse of purchasing power for the average American family. But to understand how we walked blindly into this trap, you need to know about a specific 48-hour window that Washington desperately wants you to forget. A secret deal that could have prevented this entire economic spiral buried right under our noses. Keep watching, because the details of this ignored offer will change everything you thought you knew about the motives behind this conflict. Before the first cruise missile left its silo, before the global markets began to panic, there was an off-ramp, a diplomatic exit door that was quietly locked and bolted by the powers that be. According to the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, just 48 hours before the United States initiated its intense bombing campaign, Tehran offered a massive concession. They offered to dilute 440 kilograms of their enriched uranium. Let that sink in for a moment. The stated objective of this entire military operation, the justification sold to the American public and the international community, was to permanently deny Iran a nuclear weapon. Yet when a concrete offer to neutralize nearly half a ton of the very material required to build such a weapon was placed on the table, it was completely ignored. Oman, a nation that has historically served as a neutral mediator in the Gulf, was reportedly furious. Omani diplomats believed they had a functional deal in the offing, literally within hours of the attacks beginning. They had negotiated a framework where the enriched uranium would be downgraded and possibly moved completely outside of Iranian territory. So why was the trigger pulled anyway? Donald Trump stated that the Iranian government appeared ready to make a deal, but in his exact words, the terms were not good enough yet. He went on to say that they will continue hitting the country very hard, even casually mentioning hitting targets on Kharg Island potentially for fun. This careless rhetoric exposes a terrifying disconnect between geopolitical strategy and the reality of global economics. When a leader jokes about destroying the primary oil export hub for a major nation for amusement, the financial markets take notice, and your retirement portfolio takes a hit. Now, the Iranian foreign minister says that earlier diplomatic offer is buried under the rubble, and Tehran has not asked for a ceasefire. They are digging in. This brings us to a critical question for you, the viewer. Do you believe these wars are truly fought for national security, or is there a deeper industrial and political complex driving these decisions, regardless of the diplomatic solutions available? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the sheer scale of the deception is staggering. And the worst part is, the Pentagon is making a classic, catastrophic mistake in how they are measuring success, a mistake we have not seen since the jungles of Vietnam. If you watch the daily briefings from the Pentagon, you will hear a continuous loop of statistics. They will tell you they have struck over 5,000 targets. They will boast about taking out 42 Navy ships in 3 days. They will celebrate the destruction of air defense networks and missile storage depots. It sounds like total domination. But Frank Gardner, a veteran security correspondent, has pointed out a fatal flaw in this logic. He argues that measuring the success of this campaign by the number of targets hit or commanders eliminated is the exact same catastrophic mistake the United States military made in Vietnam when they relied on enemy body counts to prove they were winning. This is not a conventional war of territorial conquest. This is a war of survivability. The Iranian strategy does not require them to shoot down American stealth bombers. or sink aircraft carriers. Their strategy is simply to endure. They have an extraordinarily high pain threshold, having already suffered over 2,000 fatalities, primarily among their Revolutionary Guard forces, without showing any signs of capitulation. The White House made a massive miscalculation by assuming that overwhelming technological advantage would intimidate the adversary into suing for peace. But here is the asymmetric trap. The United States is utilizing Tomahawk land attack missiles, sophisticated weapons that can cost over $2 million each, to destroy warehouses and launch sites. Meanwhile, the adversary is manufacturing Shahed 136 drones in underground facilities at a staggering rate. These drones are incredibly rudimentary. They are powered by simple two-stroke piston engines and use commercially available parts from all over the world. They cost somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 to produce. When an American Patriot missile, specifically the PAC-3 interceptor, which costs $4 million per shot, is used to take down a $35,000 drone, who is really winning that engagement? It is a mathematical impossibility for the United States to sustain that cost-benefit ratio long-term. The adversary is deliberately bleeding the defense budget dry, one cheap drone at a time. And while Washington focuses on the skies, the real threat, the one that could collapse the global economy, is waiting in a narrow stretch of water just 21 miles wide. Let us pivot from the desert to the ocean, specifically to the Strait of Hormuz. This is a geographical bottleneck that is only 21 miles across at its narrowest point, yet it is arguably the most important maritime artery on the planet. In normal times, approximately 20% of the daily global supply of oil and gas passes through this specific channel. Right now, maritime movement in this area is effectively at a standstill. Around 300 tankers are currently sitting idle, paralyzed by the fear of entering an active conflict zone. Why? Because the threat in this strait is not from massive battleships. It is from asymmetric naval warfare. We are talking about swarms of fast attack boats and even remote-controlled jet skis packed with high explosives. As one sharp observer noted, we are about to see what a remote-controlled jet ski, moving at 60 miles per hour, can do to a multi-billion-dollar warship. You should never attack a wasp nest with a rifle. The United States warned about the potential of sea mines being laid in the strait, a tactic used effectively in the 1980s. Even the mere suspicion that a single old World War II-style contact mine is floating in those currents is enough to completely halt commercial shipping and terrify insurance syndicates like Lloyd's of London. War premiums for vessels attempting to cross the Gulf have skyrocketed from a fraction of a percent to as high as 3% of the total hull value. For a massive oil tanker, that translates to millions of dollars in extra costs just for a single voyage. And who do you think pays for those increased insurance premiums? The shipping companies? Absolutely not. Those costs are passed directly down the supply chain, embedding themselves into the price of every single product delivered to your local supermarket. The Qatar energy minister delivered a chilling warning, stating that all Gulf energy exporters might have to cease exports entirely within days. He predicted that if this blockade continues, crude oil could surge to $150 a barrel. If you think inflation was bad 2 years ago, a $150 barrel of oil would trigger a macroeconomic shockwave that would make previous crises look like a minor correction. The entire global economy is currently being held hostage by a 21-mile stretch of water, and the United States Navy simply does not have the numbers to escort every commercial vessel to safety. We need to bring this back to your bank account, because geopolitical posturing means nothing if you cannot afford to heat your home or fill your gas tank. The economic consequences of this conflict are not just an unfortunate byproduct. They are a core component of how modern asymmetric warfare is fought. In the United Kingdom, the Chancellor explicitly warned that some petrol retailers are already engaging in price gouging, charging vastly different rates at the pumps as panic sets in. But fuel is just the tip of the iceberg. The broader financial markets are reacting with brutal efficiency. Let us look at the housing market. Because of the renewed inflationary pressures caused by spiking energy costs and disrupted supply chains, central banks are suddenly hesitant to cut interest rates. As a direct result, mortgage rates are climbing again. The average 5-year fixed mortgage rate recently breached 5% for the first time in months. This means the dream of homeownership is slipping further away for the average citizen, directly because of a foreign policy decision made thousands of miles away. Furthermore, major shipping executives are warning that, with up to 40,000 containers moving in and out of the Gulf every week, the backlog is accumulating at a terrifying pace. Perishable goods are at risk of spoiling, and manufacturing components are delayed, which will inevitably lead to shortages on store shelves. Saudi Arabia's state oil company Aramco issued a stark warning that a prolonged conflict could be absolutely catastrophic for the global economy. Yet, the political leadership in Washington seems oblivious to the incoming financial tsunami. They continue to promise that victory is right around the corner. But the markets know better. Wall Street analysts are quietly adjusting their forecasts, preparing for a prolonged period of stagflation, where economic growth stalls while prices continue to soar. This brings us to a harsh reality check. If the stated goal was to make America safer, how does intentionally triggering a global energy crisis and domestic inflation achieve that objective? It is a question that the architects of this war absolutely refuse to answer. And as the financial pain intensifies, the political narrative is beginning to fracture in real time. We are about to see a domestic backlash that could reshape the political landscape faster than any election cycle. You cannot sustain a trillion-dollar war effort without the consent of the governed, and right now, that consent is rapidly evaporating. The American public is waking up to the financial realities of this intervention. A recent PBS poll revealed that a solid 56% of respondents are outright opposed to this military action. Another survey showed 45% believe this conflict is actively making America less safe. There are rallies happening from Los Angeles to Boston, with citizens demanding an end to the endless cycles of Middle Eastern conflicts. The core issue is that the administration has completely failed to articulate what the imminent threat actually was. The intelligence community previously assessed that the prospect of a nuclear weapon was roughly a decade away. So why the sudden massive rush to war? Politicians are attempting to shape a victory narrative because they know the economic consequences are hitting American voters where it hurts the most. But the messaging is chaotic and contradictory. On one hand, officials claim this is not a regime change war. Yet on the other hand, the president openly calls for the citizens to rise up and overthrow their government, demanding nothing less than unconditional surrender. He even suggested he must personally be involved in selecting the next supreme leader of the opposing nation. This kind of erratic diplomacy only strengthens the resolve of the adversary. As ancient military strategist Sun Tzu warned, when you surround an army, leave an outlet free. Do not press a desperate foe too hard. By demanding absolute humiliation and unconditional surrender, Washington leaves the opposing forces with zero options other than fighting with maximum lethality. This is exactly what we are witnessing. Despite enduring a barrage of over 5,000 strikes, the adversary is still launching drone swarms at neighboring countries that host American military bases, specifically targeting the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Qatar. They are deliberately expanding the pain, dragging global economic hubs into the crossfire to prove that American air defense systems cannot protect everyone. And in a stunning twist of irony, the United States military, with its nearly trillion-dollar annual budget, has found itself so overwhelmed by these cheap drone tactics that they have had to turn to an unexpected ally for help. This is perhaps the most shocking revelation of the entire conflict. The United States and its incredibly wealthy Gulf allies are facing a massive shortage of sophisticated interceptor missiles. The European Union Commission admitted this week that neither the Americans nor the Europeans have enough inventory to continually supply the region. So, what is the backup plan? Desperation has led them to reach out to Ukraine. The United States has formally asked Ukraine to help defend its Gulf allies from the specific threat of the Shahed drone swarms. Think about the profound irony here. The world's sole superpower is asking a nation currently fighting its own brutal war of survival to provide tactical advice and equipment to protect multi-billion-dollar oil infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken to leaders in the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain, offering to take concrete steps to help them defend their critical infrastructure. Why Ukraine? Because necessity is the mother of invention. While Western defense contractors focus on building extremely expensive, highly complex missile systems, Ukrainian special forces have developed low-cost, highly effective interceptor drones. A Ukrainian drone commander explained that they created specialized interceptors capable of reaching speeds of 150 miles per hour, designed specifically to ram and destroy incoming drones at a fraction of the cost of a traditional missile. They realized early on that you cannot win a war of attrition by destroying cheap assets with expensive ones. The Ukrainians have mastered the art of specialized mobile air defense groups, and now they are poised to export this critical knowledge to the Middle East. This exposes a massive vulnerability in the Western military-industrial complex. We have spent decades optimizing for profit margins and technological supremacy in conventional warfare, while completely neglecting the reality of modern, decentralized, asymmetric conflicts. The Pentagon is learning a very expensive lesson in real time, and unfortunately, it is the taxpayer who is footing the bill for this institutional arrogance. But the tactical failures are only part of the story. The legal and ethical foundations of this operation are also beginning to crumble under international scrutiny. In the rush to launch Operation Epic Fury, a major detail was conspicuously bypassed. The United States Congress never authorized this war. Furthermore, there was no attempt to seek a resolution from the United Nations Security Council. International law generally prohibits the use of force against another sovereign nation except in cases of immediate self-defense or with explicit UN authorization. Legal experts and diplomatic correspondents are pointing out that while Article 51 of the UN Charter allows for preemptive action in self-defense, there appears to be absolutely no sound basis for it in this specific scenario. There was no evidence of an imminent attack that required an immediate, massive bombing campaign. Instead, the administration simply decided they had enough and initiated a war of choice. This blatant disregard for international norms sets a terrifying precedent. It signals to the rest of the world that the rules-based international order is effectively dead, and that raw military power is the only currency that matters. We are already seeing the regional fallout. An Iranian opposition base in northern Iraq was hit by a ballistic missile. A drone strike hit an airport in Azerbaijan. The conflict is spilling across borders, destabilizing an already volatile region. The longer this stretches on, the greater the risk of a miscalculation that drags other major global powers into the fray. This is not just a localized dispute, it is a geopolitical earthquake. The use of cluster munitions in residential areas, a practice banned by international conventions, further escalates the brutality of the conflict. When the dust finally settles, the United States will face severe diplomatic isolation. The credibility of American leadership is being shredded on the global stage, making it infinitely harder to negotiate future trade deals, secure alliances, or enforce sanctions. The cost of this war cannot be measured merely in dollars spent on munitions. It must also include the incalculable loss of global influence and trust. And as we look toward the endgame, the strategic horizon appears incredibly bleak. We are entering the third week of this conflict, and the uncomfortable truth is beginning to dawn on military planners. There is no clear exit strategy. When you demand unconditional surrender from a nation that views its survival as a holy mandate, you guarantee a perpetual state of conflict. The opposing forces know they cannot win a direct military confrontation, so they will not fight one. They will melt into the mountains, utilize their extensive network of underground tunnels, and rely on their vast proxy networks across Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen to continue a low-intensity war of attrition. They will make the Strait of Hormuz a permanent no-go zone for Western shipping, effectively placing a permanent tax on global trade. President Trump claims the military is ahead of schedule and that it is total demolition of the enemy. But demolition of infrastructure does not equal the submission of a people. History is littered with empires that won every battle, but ultimately lost the war because they fundamentally misunderstood the resilience of their adversaries. The administration is banking on internal regime collapse, hoping that the intense bombing will cause the population to rise up and overthrow their leaders. However, reports from the ground suggest the exact opposite may be happening. While many citizens despise the clerics, the relentless foreign bombardment is forcing a grim unification against an external threat. As one observer noted, the worst part about a 3-day operation is the first 4 years, just ask the Russians. The United States is sliding into another quagmire, a forever war that will quietly drain resources, while the media slowly loses interest. The initial shock and awe will fade, but the economic consequences will persist. We are looking at a scenario where victory is impossible to define, and defeat is politically unacceptable to admit. It is the ultimate strategic deadlock, and the only guaranteed outcome is continuous, grinding instability in the energy markets. Let us cut through the noise and face the absolute reality of this situation. This is not a war over territory, and despite the rhetoric, it is barely a war over nuclear proliferation. This is a masterclass in asymmetrical financial warfare. The adversary is using $35,000 drones to force the United States to fire $4 million missiles, while simultaneously choking off 20% of the global energy supply. They are weaponizing the global supply chain, turning the basic mechanics of international shipping and insurance premiums into instruments of economic sabotage. And the tragedy is, the current leadership walked right into the trap. By ignoring the 48-hour diplomatic off-ramp and choosing the path of epic fury, they have exposed the vulnerabilities of the American economic empire. So, what does this mean for you? It means the era of cheap energy and low inflation is effectively over. The geopolitical risk premium is now permanently baked into the cost of everything you buy. You need to start thinking defensively about your own assets. How exposed is your portfolio to energy shocks? Are you prepared for a prolonged period of high interest rates as central banks struggle to contain supply-side inflation? The mainstream media wants you to focus on the explosions in the sky. But as an independent thinker, you must keep your eyes firmly fixed on the underlying flow of capital. This war will end eventually, but the financial architecture of the world will be forever altered. Now, I turn it over to you. Do you think the administration genuinely miscalculated the economic fallout? Or is this financial disruption an intentional feature of a much larger, darker geopolitical game? Let me know your precise thoughts in the comments below. Stay sharp, question the narrative, and always follow the money.